Hello. Good evening, everyone. Dayanya hipie, ohami takiapie, Dakotaia chale ishtazinawi emakiapie, washichu ia Rebecca Mousseau emakiapie, mini wakan oyanke hemataha na mini shota edwati, wakantipi awayankapi hiktawanie, Dakotawi choha ta oash awayanka nakud ed hiktanie. Hello, relatives. My name is Ishtazinawi. My Dakota name is Ishtazinawi Yellow Eyes Woman. My English name is Rebecca Mousseau. I'm from the Spirit Lake Nation in North Dakota. I currently live in Minnesota, Makoche, Minnesota. I am the Dakota Lifeways Programs Manager for Wakantipi Awayankapi. And welcome to our Spring Gifts of the Plant Nation webinar. Our plant relative we're highlighting today is aƞhasaƞ, sugar maple. Pidamayaye. Thank you everyone for being here this evening. And thank you to the U.S. Forest Service for partnering with us for our seasonal webinar series. Before we begin, we will be sharing, we'll have live captioning enabled if you need, which you should be able to if you are on Zoom. Adjust your settings to have captioning. If you're joining via Facebook Live, you may not see our interpreter. The recording will be posted to our YouTube page afterwards also. We will be sharing a survey reminder at the end. We would really appreciate your feedback. If you have 3 extra minutes to spare, the results will help us reflect and plan for meaningful and impactful programming in the future. Tonight's speakers are Beckie Taylor, Nicki Buck, and Gabby Menomin. And they'll be presenting in this order. And this is a special intro for me because our first speaker is one of my favorite humans. And I'm excited to hear her and hear her stories and her teachings, is Beckie Taylor. She is an independent cultural consultant. She is a proud tribal member of the Bad River Band of Lake Superior, Ojibwa. Beckie is the 2nd degree Medewin of the Three Fires Medicine Lodge and a member of the Martin clan. Beckie resides with her family on the Prairie Island Indian Dakota Community. Currently, she serves as the vice chairwoman of the Nisawishkode Inc., a nonprofit organization whose mission is to assist in the continued learning and teaching of the Anishinaabe Medewin Society. I will turn it over to Beckie.
Habuju Nindwe Maganedug, Jean Magazi Gijigo Quen de Jinakaz, Wabashashi and Dodam Mashkazi Bean and Onjaba, Nishinabe Quen Dao Winisho Medeo. Good evening, friends and relatives, and thank you for the invitation to come and share a little bit about my knowledge of the maple sugar or maple harvest. As my sister Beckie had shared, I am a proud member of the Bad River Band of Lake Superior, Ojibwa. And it is there that I have experienced and learned a lot of my teachings. But today, I live within the Prairie Island Indian Community. I have lived here and resided here for about 35 5 years, 30 or so years. And I live here with my husband, who is also a proud member of the Prairie Island Indian Community. And together we have harvested sap here and done a sugar bush here within the Dakota community for the last 15 years. Uh, we have taken many steps to ensure that this practice continues um, every year within our family and within the community to help preserve this way of life. Um, so to begin, I just wanted to um, talk a little bit about the original teachings that I had been given in my life by many of my teachers. Many of my teachers are from Bad River, but also northern Wisconsin, and they they took their time and made sure that this practice continued on because there was, it seemed, a generational gap where this practice had almost died out within our Indian communities. Um, First of all, the harvest of the maple trees, the maple sap, is a practice that has originated here within the Indigenous land of North America. Um, and it was here before, and the practice of it was here before there was any European or colonial contact. Um, to us as Anishinaabe Ojibwe people, to the story of that, um, and all as is all of our Indigenous practices, was handed down in our oral traditions. The story of how it came to be, um, as all things were for our people here in this part of the world, was given by the Spirit in a time when there was great hardship. The people, depending on the region, there's different stories, but at some point, it's basically the same because you got to think about the regions of where maple sugaring is done is all the way from the East Coast, all the way, into the Midwest and further. Um, and it has been practiced throughout all of those tribes within that area. The story that is generally the same is that during a time where there was a very, very great, there was a hard harvest in the fall, and it was a very long and hard winter. And the people questioned and asked and petitioned the Spirit and asked, what is um, what is it that we can do to help our people? What is it um, that we can give to our people, because our people were dying and there was no sustenance. It was too cold. There were no the snares were empty. Uh, the coffers were empty from the harvest from the fall, and so the Spirit answered in a way and instructed the people to go to this tree and from it drink from this tree. And through that, they were able to survive. Uh, Now, that all of these different stories that it shows that there are different variations of the story of how that came to be. There are different stories of how we learned to uh, to process the sugar water. The in Anishinaabe, it's called Ninatiganabe, or the tree is called a tikanabe, and the sap is called Ninatigwabu, the 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 sap or the water of the tree. Um, there's a lot of different variations of that story of how it is that we were taught and learned to process that sugar. But through the years, the processing and the collection of it uh, has pretty much stayed the same. If you can go to the next slide. The original way of tapping the tree the first process of it was we went out, our people went out, we offered our sema. Some people offer ceremony, some people offer a song that goes with that. And you put your tobacco out before you even begin the process of preparation. And preparation for maple sugaring is a lot. the You have to think how it was for our people back then. You know, they had to watch the weather. You have to watch the weather and know that when it's warm in the day and the sun is getting so warm that a little bit of the snow is melting, but it's freezing back up at night. So when you go out in the morning, you step in the snow, it cracks. And so you know that there's warm weather coming and our trees are beginning to wake up. And so they know that the spirit has shown them that it's time to prepare. And in preparation, they gathered wood, they gathered their vessels and what they were going to use to gather that sap, and also they gathered sumac branches. Back in the day, what they would do is they would just take an axe and gash the tree and take the sumac branches that could be hollowed out. In the photograph here, you see it's still practiced today. These are spigots that are made of sumac branches. These these photographs actually came from one of my friends who is up harvesting in Bad River now with his family, and he made them with his family. And now we use a drill, but back then they would just you could burn a hole through the middle with a stick. Um, and then they would have to, collect their stuff. We still got to do that now. We have to clean out all of our taps. We have to get. You see here is my daughter by our little backyard processing center. Uh, what we do now is we take the drill, we go out to the trees instead of gashing it with an axe. We take our buckets and we go out and um, we offer our tobacco first, and we talk to those trees, the Tigana Bay, and we let them know what it is that we're there to do, and we express our desire to take care of our relatives and to take care of ourselves in a good way and to harvest their medicine. Uh, and so, like I said, with me and my family, we do this today. Uh, we we still do the same process. I have to have wood delivered to my house, or I go out with my family from time to time and we gather the wood. And then when it starts to get warm for about 3 days in a row, or I get to watch the Weather Channel, but uh, our ancestors didn't get to do that. But I watch the weather and I make sure that when I see the temperatures in the 40s this year, they went all the way up into the 50s. Climate change is real, and it is affecting the way that we harvest our medicines here in southern Minnesota. And so uh, we were able to put our taps out very early this year. And it was about 3 or 4 days of straight 40s and 50s weather in early mid-February, when usually we wouldn't get our taps in until beginning of March. And so it was, late February, mid to late February. I was preparing all of our stuff, getting our wood together, getting all of my buckets sanitized and cleaned out, and getting my sugar shack, that's what I call it, my sugar shack, ready to go to the next one, to go to the next process, and that's to put our buckets out. And when we collect, that's another thing. When you're doing this, you need to really think about how it is that you're going to do all of these steps. How are you going to collect? How are you going to get the wood? Where are you going to process your sugar? Uh, who's going to be there to help you? And try and remember, why it is that you're doing this. Um, we the trees we tap are not here in our yard. They're at least 3 miles away, and I transport them. If you see the buckets behind my daughter, she comes out into the woods with me, and we harvest. We empty our buckets into those 5-gallon buckets, and when I have five-gallon buckets, so 25 gallons, we start to process. You can go to the next slide. So the first couple years that we did our sugaring was here in Prairie Island. These are my nephews, and this was about 13 years ago. And this was one of the first processing spaces that we had near the trees, because we didn't have everything that we needed to transport all the sap to our homes. And it was something that was just being revitalized here in the community. But what I was saying, when I process my sap, I usually do the first process. The first 5-gallon or 25 gallons will be syrup. The next 25 gallons I collect. We will make sugar. And the next 25 gallons that we collect will be candy. So there are many different things. And historically, we always had these things. We had syrup, we had candy and sugar, we had taffy. I remember being a little girl and being out in the woods at my family's sugar bush. And actually, it was at the first time it happened was at a community, a trails program in our reservation that had collectively worked together with a neighboring reservation, and they had put together a sugar bush, and we were able to go out with a lot of the kids in the community, and they made candy there for us, and they made taffy in the snow. And what they would do is they would boil it down. It's a process of evaporation and reduction. You get past the process of where it's syrup, and they would take the taffy, or that sap that was really, really thick, and they would pour it in the snow, and you would take a stick and you roll it over the top of it, and then you would have taffy on the stick, and it was really, really good. One of the things that I have found is that for me and my family, we know my husband. He has special needs, and he is a quadriplegic. And winters for us can be really hard. They can be really hard because we are isolated and we don't get to go out a lot. But as soon as the warmer days start coming, this is a way, and as it was for our people back then, it was a way for us to emerge from a long winter. It's a way for me to emerge from a long winter and go and recenter myself in nature and start to do my work in my community and my family, and gather the medicines that we need. I harvest the sugar. This is the sugar that we made this year, and I get I collect many jars, 1 quart jars. I process as much as I can, and I give it to my family members. And the candy that I make, I give it to my family members who are diabetic, because as many people know, uh, the Indigenous people of this land, we are not. Our bodies are not accustomed to the white sugars, the heavily processed carbs, and this is the medicine that a lot of our relatives who are diabetic need to be able to stabilize their sugars. So when my mom is in need of, to stabilize her sugar, she has our candy, and she can take that out, and she can use the sugars in her tea or in her coffee, and that'll help her throughout the day. Um, as I said, as it was stated in the beginning, that I am a member of the Three Fires Medewan Lodge, and there are ceremonies that we have participated in that require our maple sap, the maple sugars. That it is a medicine that is given to help our people, and it is utilized within those ceremonies. There have also been times here in Prairie Island when I have made offerings and done water bundle offerings, and um, for feasts for relatives, I have utilized the sugar then to help ensure that there is a healthy dish that is given, and that also shows our plant relatives that um, I am happy to utilize their gifts that are from here, from my community, um, to feed the people of this place, to help them to be healthy. One of the things that I was taught early on is that these plants, our plant relatives, were placed here to do work for creation, and that is what they are waiting to do. So when we went out, you can go to the next slide. When we went out and we started doing this, I was more than overjoyed to be able to take young people out, my relatives out, my friends and family, and show them these places where it is that this collection was going to happen, and these trees where and talk to them and tell them that we are here to ensure that your work is done for creation. And because of that, my family has benefited, our community has benefited, a whole entire generation is now benefited within this community, as one of our co-panelists my co-panelists will discuss today. Um, and I think that's where I'll leave that. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer what I can. And thank you again for inviting me to come and share a little bit about what it is that we do with our plant relative, the Atiganabe, the maple sugar tree. Miigwech.
Thank you, Becky. Again, if you have questions for the speaker, please add them to the Q&A sections of the Zoom webinar. Type your questions in the comments on the Facebook Live. And questions, we'll do our best to get to all of the questions at the end of the presentation. Up next, we have Nicki Buck. Nicki Ampetu Wiohiampatawi Echiapie. Eastern Day Woman is her Dakota name. She was born and raised on her tribal nation of Prairie Island, Tinthawinta, Dakota Community. Nicki is a former employee of the Prairie Island Land and Environment Department and is now an independent contractor, sharing her Indigenous knowledge of plant medicines, food sovereignty, and community engagement. Nicki is a former Red Wing Public School District school board member from 2020 to 2024 and a former community engagement coordinator with the Honoring Dakota Project and is now the new director of the Honoring Dakota Project. And I will turn it over to Nicki.
Madakiapi. Petuio hi ampatawi amakiapie. Washitu ia Nicki Buck imakiapie. Bedewa Kantua, Damakota, Tintawinta Mataha, Himani Chadwati. Hello, my relatives. My Dakota name is Eastern Day Woman. My Washichu name is Nicki Buck. I am Bedewa Kantua, Dakota from Tintawinta, Prairie Island, and I live in Red Wing. And so I'm very honored to be here today. Just as mentioned, I just came off a 4-year term with the Red Wing Public Schools as a school board member. So during that time, that kind of limited my participation in Prairie Island's Maple Camp for the last couple of years. But lucky for us, we have a whole community participation to keep that going. I don't know if anybody wanted to put my slides up. So, oh shoot, unlike Beckie's story, mine's just a little bit different. Even though I was born and raised on Prairie Island, there's a lot of things that many of us didn't get to participate in because of the generational gap that Beckie had mentioned earlier. And due to sometimes those things, it's been said that we kind of live on a food desert. And so access to healthy foods and nutritious foods was very limited. Even just down, I don't know where many of you come from, but just down in this rural area in general, it is very limited. But so I got sick with my health really bad. And I've been hyperglycemic most of my life from a poor diet. I drank water for the first time at 28 years old. And so very young, in early 20s, and especially after I had my children, my health wreaked havoc. And so I was at the mercy of Western medicine, Mayo Health Systems, with a multitude of things. I have a kidney disease. I had mental health issues from said kidney disease. And then just my overall health was poor because of the hyperglycemia. And so I decided to take my life back through nutrition first. And then I just didn't feel like any of the diets that I participated in throughout the years really was a match for me to keep a successful, it's a successful health, ongoing health. So that's when I decided to reach back out to Uncle Art, as you can see in the picture, to kind of teach me everything that I needed to know. And then it was obviously during the time. And so let's start with Maple Camp. And so if you wanted, that's the area that's called Buffalo Slough. There's like a cove in there, and it's very, very special to me. That's where my dad, who is now passed on for he'll be 31 years in May. That's where he used to take all of us little res rats and take us fishing there. We'd stay there for weekends. And so then all the teachings that Uncle has passed on, it's just a very special area. And not only emotionally, but spiritually and physically, because it does, like Beckie said, they Plant Nation, they live for us too. They live for not only us, like everything else. That's their job. And in order to maintain that connection and help them, we have to be a part of the circle. So making sure, if I was going to learn this, it's, how many other people missed out on it. And so giving the whole community an opportunity to find their gift in the community. If we've never tried it, how do we know if it may be like our specialty, our expertise to what we can give back to the community? So making sure it was accessible, available, and just making sure that most of us are new learners here. And so if you want to go to the next slide. I didn't really know nothing. I knew nothing. We'll just be real honest. I knew nothing about this. So, but I knew we had to. So Uncle's guiding me through all this. He's like, we need to have a burner system. So I called my ex-husband, and he's good at building things. So I said, can you build us? Can you help us build a burner? And so this is what he came up with. He went for a few YouTube channel videos, I guess, and then he kind of got all the supplies, told me that this is how it had to be built, and then we went at it. We created it. And so that was kind of our first sap boiler right into the slough, where we, as you can see, the tape around those trees. We marked trees, but when we mark trees, we don't always usually tap all of them, because sometimes they've been tapped multiple times and we give some a break different years. So if you want to go to the next slide. So that's actually this year. I think that first slide was probably 2015 or 16. I can't remember what year that was, but this one was just this year. I think Daryl Campbell, he's an elder in our community. I don't think he's in this picture. He might be in the future pictures, but he made this circle fire pit, I guess we would call it. And that's kind of like our new system. Through grants and stuff, we were able to purchase that big metal one, as you can see. And now everything's ran through kind of the Wicho-Ohlone State Committee, our Good Health Committee on Prairie Island, and organized through that as well. If you wanted to go to the next slide, please. So in the first picture, many of those same adults that are there were in the picture beforehand in the very first creation. So that's a really cool fact. And then from the first picture, what it was we didn't have a whole lot of kids. It was usually if we did, it was usually the kids that weren't in school yet. So as you can see, this was the first year that we were able to get NASA from Red Wing Public Schools down to Tintawinta this year to participate in the boil from start to finish. So I like to take things like a little bit step for education. I think it wouldn't have been as hard or difficult for people like us if we had opportunities like this, and not just, Indigenous people. I just firmly believe in outdoor classrooms and the connection. I think that for me, because my brain, it learns better outside because you've got so many noises and sounds to distract you. So that way, when information's being brought to me, I can focus on that. I know that sounds kind of backwards, but my brain is backwards because I have ADHD. So if we want to go to the next slide. So this is a couple of tribal members, Mikhail and Bruce, and they're filtering some of the sap. So Beckie did talk about the importance of preparation for this. It's a lot of work. Plan to spend many hours. What was taught to me by Uncle Art is that we used to have camps. And that was kind of like the whole idea of getting a burner set there in the first place, because the idea of like spending overnight time over there. And I know we've talked about it having like an outdoor cooking shack too, but sometimes things take time, and planning to do it in a good way and in a right way. So I do know that we will be maybe getting a outdoor cook shack up at that Bark Lodges, but in this is it's a flood zone, more times than none. And so depending on the severity, sometimes it doesn't always flood in March and April, but it will wait to flood in June and July. So, like Beckie said, our ancestors, and still today, we have to, everything relies on the weather and when the trees and everything else is ready. So one year we had a mishap. I think it was like our second year. We had a bad batch. So I think what we traced it back to was like maybe a stirring spoon had gotten tainted, I guess, and then tainted a whole boiling batch. So preparation and sanitation is of most importance. So next slide, please. Again, yep, after 9 years, we finally were able to bring the classroom outside. The amount of pride that these young adults had felt by contributing and doing something. And so they weren't able to stay for the full, complete process, but they did make a request to be able to have the final process brought up to the school, so that way they can really understand the start to finish process. And so when talking about that, and I'm a completely different person than what I used to be. Let's be real. I used to be a person that wasted food. I was indecisive. I didn't know if I wanted a McChicken sandwich or a cheeseburger. So I'd get both and I wouldn't finish it, and I just waste it. After my own life got real bad from the health, and I decided to make the connection to the cultural teachings and living by them with the community, I then understood the hard work that went into it. And so the life then is so different than the life now, because there's no wasting. If it's like, it's harmful, because I know that tree gave its life for us. And like Beckie mentioned, maple sugar, maple syrup, they're the maple candy, they're the best type of sugar for our bodies. I didn't know then, because I was never given a nutritional consultation for ADHD. I wasn't given a nutritional consultation until I had gestational diabetes when I was 28, and I was 5 when I was medically diagnosed with ADHD, but could have greatly benefited from the nutritional consultation, because then that way I would have learned the devastating effects of white sugar on my brain And so my mom thought, you know, don't let her have caffeine because she's already wild enough. So that will make her even more uncontrollable. She did not understand that white sugar was the actual culprit, and which is found in many of the foods that we eat today. If you go and look at labels, you'll see that white sugar just kind of fills everything today. And so it's really bad for the brain. And so now my lifestyle is if I try something on the outside and I like it, and it's loaded with all these not good ingredients, that I'll be able, like, let's say, I'll give you an example. I used to love the pineapple refreshers from Starbucks, but for social justice reasons, I decided to boycott. Plus, I didn't realize they were putting an insane amount of caffeine in there. I asked them a couple times after I didn't go to bed until 2 o'clock in the morning. And they did put caffeine. So I still liked that drink. So what I did is I made my own pineapple and I burned down the simple syrup with water and maple sugar. If I can't use maple sugar because it's limited in supply, because the process is just so beautiful. It's not only that the tree, but like the love from not only the tree, but the human being. And so that's why I think that medicine is just a little bit more magic than for me per se than coconut sugar or the white granulated sugar, you know. So and with teas and stuff, I prefer to sweeten with honey or maple syrup or maple sugar, just because to keep my own personal blood sugar in a good balance. So that way I have optimal health. Next slide, please. These are just a second. Sorry about that. So the one of me hugging the tree, I am a tree hugger. I love to hug trees because they just give good energy, good positive grounding energy. But in this case, I'm actually hugging it to give a demonstration of pretty much maybe how many taps I want to put in one. You know, if I could touch a tree, I probably don't want to put, I mean, this one, as I can see the holes in it, this one's probably been put in twice. I would never want to put more than 2 taps in this one. And because we had threats of flooding during the springtime, and that kind of chased us out of during tapping season, we do have sugar maples on the side, and then I believe it's on the south side going up County 18. And so, but that's such a hilly, it's very scary to be scaling the side of that, putting buckets up there and going to retrieve them. So what we did was we did consult with Beckie and her cousin and her, about the tubing system. As you can see, that's my son. He was learning. We've experimented with this outdoor classroom a couple of times, and so we have to be mindful of the not only of the school, the education entity, but also the tribal entity and all the legality of everything. So everything has been kind of like a trial and error for us. So I did utilize him for this teaching. And so, but he was pretty excited. As you can see, is the smile on his face. He got to spend an entire day outside, not inside school, and learning something new that was near and dear to his culture. Next slide. So because we made it accessible and available to all of our tribal and community members. We had some years where different groups were able to maintain it and keep it going before it was put into the Wichoshanniwa State Committee and ran through that. And so, you know, some years are better than others. 2020 happened to be a really good year for us. As you can see, we had enough production to give out to our tribal members. And we, my niece, Kachina Yeager, ended up designing this particular design label that went on our maple syrup bottles. So essentially, I went and tapped. I have 2 giant Japanese maples in my front yard. In the profession that I am, I highlight, I educate, and I promote native plants. Japanese maples aren't native to this area, but these Japanese maples have provided so much for this home that I live in. It was built in 1880, and the foundation of it was, history isn't always good, but the foundation of this home was from Himanicha. They blasted it out. So I said, well, if anybody's going to live and honor and take care of it, well, then it might as well be me. So how I see these 2 Japanese maples is they've taken care of this house for a very long time. This house is 145 years. So I'm going to say at least 100 years. I like to take in knowledge, but my biggest tool of learning is actually making the connection to the actual living being itself and learning from it. So from these Japanese maples, because they're right in my front yard, I have access to them. I learned that they're a month slower with the leaves coming off than normal. So that kind of sucks for me in a sense that I've got maybe 1 or 2 days before snow falls in order to get things not in the road, because I have to live by laws and rules by the city. So I have to make sure that that road is free of leaves and debris. And then also they bud a little bit later. They bud a little bit later than the sugar maples. I also did a little bit of research. They have a lower sugar and sweet content than sugar maples here. I like to do a lot of experimenting, even though I didn't tap last year. And as Beckie had mentioned, climate change is real. And, you know, I decided to take a year off last year because I wanted to be in observation mode, because it concerned me greatly that I was tapping trees that had buds on them already. That's not normal, not unnormal for me, but that doesn't mean that it's not unnecessarily new normal for our future. We have to learn to evolve with. And in particular, and for me, I had to grieve. I had to grieve what was normal too, in order to like accept this new normal in. So I like to personally make a connection to the living being itself and learn from the tree itself. And sometimes that takes time, because like any relationship, unlike a book or a person just to tell me the knowledge, sometimes I have to earn that living being's trust. And so that's where the time comes in. It takes to come in, but that's, you know, it's part of the process. And just like the seasons, they all have their time. They all have their seasons. I don't know how I am with time, but I will conclude with my essential role in all this. I am designed to bring people together. You know, I know what I missed out on. And so I can't imagine what all of our relatives have maybe missed out on, or maybe they just, if they didn't miss out on, they need space to continue it. Because I do know that our Twin Cities is probably the largest Native population. I know they argued that with Albuquerque maybe at one point, but regardless, being so close to the proximity of the Twin Cities, to be a Dakota means to also take care of all of our relatives, create space for everybody to be able to live and experience this way of life. So making sure that our spaces are always inviting, inclusive, and welcoming is more or less my job. And then finding other tribal and community members to maybe take my space sooner than later, because the ADHD is real, and I only have an attention span of 4 years, and then we must move on. So I will conclude my presentation with that. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Nicki. I want to say thank you to both Nicki and Beckie so far for sharing about yourselves and sharing your knowledge about the aƞhasaƞ with us. Our next speaker is Gabby Menomin. She is Forest County Potawatomi out of Wisconsin, and she is Wakantipi's Director of Land and Environment. And I will turn it over to Gabby.
Bonjour, Jayak, Kwekabnok Tejanakas, Wasi and Dudam, Wisconsin Dudbaya. So hello everyone, my name is Gabby Menomin, like Rebecca said. And yeah, today I'm going to talk a little bit about the kind of ecology and other kinship roles that aƞhasaƞ has with the environment and wildlife and things like that. So if we could go to the next slide. And I'll try to keep my yapping to a minimum because I know we would like some time for questions as well. So aƞhasaƞ, otherwise known as sugar maple. This is a native deciduous hardwood tree that grows in the Midwest and Northeast portions of the United States and some of southern Southeast Canada as well. The Latin name is Acer saccharum. The saccharum part kind of paying homage to the the sugar contents of this tree, and it is part of the Sapindaceae family, which is a soapberry family. Some of the relatives, the maple relatives that sugar maple has here in Minnesota are the red, black, silver, and mountain maples, as well as box elder as well. And all of these maple relatives and this Acer genus all contain some degree of sugary sap. I was able to find a couple research articles that kind of break down approximately what that sugar content is and kind of like ranking who has the highest sugar content versus lower sugar content. And sugar maple out of all the maples has the highest sugar content, and then after that it goes red maple, Amur maple, silver maple, and then box elder as well. So all of these relatives, you are able to tap them. It just depends on, if you only have silver maples in your yard, it's going to take a lot more sap from those silver maples than it would be the sugar maples. That's something to keep in mind. And depending on the species, like box elder has a slightly different taste than the sugar maples as well. But other relatives here in Minnesota that are part of the Sapindaceae family, kind of more what you would consider like cousins, distant cousins to the maple, are horse chestnut and Ohio buckeye as well. And so sugar maples, they like to grow in rich mesic woods. So mesic is just generally referring to soil conditions where there's a medium amount of moisture. They're usually well drained and typically have a pretty decent amount of organic material in them as well. But they can also tolerate slightly drier upland woodland conditions. Generally speaking, though, they do like deep, moist, and fertile soils that are pretty well drained. They can handle some more lowland conditions, although they are not tolerant at all to persistent water in the soil. So you won't find them in a wetland or anything. And so sugar maples, they generally are a very dominant species in a lot of the forest habitats that they grow in. And so you'll typically see them in pure stands, but then you'll also see them in other types of forest habitats as well as either um, one of two dominant species or a secondary dominant species. So they really love to grow with their relatives, but they have a lot of different friends as well. We'll get into those in a bit. We want to go to the next slide. And I wanted to put in a note about invasive maples here that do grow in Minnesota. So one of them being the Norway maple, and then the next one being the Amur maple. So the Norway maple comes from Europe mainly, and I believe Western Asia as well. And so this is one that this always tripped me up in school when we would go out and have tests identifying the different plants and trees. I always got this one mixed up with sugar maple. Um, but there are some key differences between sugar maple and Norway maple. So the Norway maple is generally going to have very large leaves in comparison to sugar maple. And if you were to break a twig, it's going to have this like milky sap in it as well. And then the Amur maple, this one comes from Asia. Um, and this one it doesn't grow, typically doesn't grow as big as the sugar maple. So it's more of like a medium-sized tree. And then in the wild, it can look fairly shrubby and form these like pretty dense thickets as well. And you can see that on the leaves, they're a lot thinner, and they generally have those three lobes. And that middle lobe is going to be, fairly elongated compared to other maple species. And really, the issue with these two introduced species is they were introduced for ornamental purposes, so to make, boulevards and urban areas look really nice. But once they get into the wild, the issue that we run into with these maples is that they are very prolific seeders. So they will throw out tons and tons of seeds and will resprout very, very easily in the conditions around here. All right, next slide. So I wanted to go through some identification of aƞhasaƞ or sugar maple. So the bark is going to be a fairly paler gray bark. When they're younger, the bark is pretty smooth. And as the tree gets older, throughout time, it's going to develop these really deep ridges and furrows. And it's going to be, they're pretty asymmetrical in sizes and their placement. So if you get like a really, really old maple tree, sometimes the bark can almost look like it's almost shaggy and coming off of the tree as well. Typically, you're going to have very distinct gray bark as well. And then with the leaves, they are opposite in arrangement. So opposite on the twig is they're right, one leaf is right across from the other, as opposed to alternate, which looks more like kind of step ladder type arrangement. So aƞhasaƞ is opposite leaf arrangement, and you're going to have these 5 lobes that come off of the leaf as well. And so those lobes are going to have those, very pointed, thin points on them. And then in between the lobes, those are called sinuses. And the easy way to distinguish sugar maple from some of the other maples is that those sinuses are C-shaped. A very common maple that you'll see growing with sugar maple will be red maple, and those have more of a V-shaped sinus. And a cool little fact about the leaves as well, so they have a pretty high starch content in the early fall when they're starting to change colors and getting ready to fall off. And the leaves contain a lot of different nutrients as well. They contain magnesium, potassium, phosphorus, and nitrogen. Next, we have the buds in the upper right-hand photo. And so the buds are pretty small and pointed. One of my coworkers said it kind of looks like a chicken foot. which is funny because it also the buds are also scaly like chicken feet as well. And so they're going to be kind of this deeper brown color, and those scales on them are going to be overlapping. And the terminal bud, which is the bud that's right at the end of the twig or in between those two smaller buds, that terminal bud is going to be larger than the lateral buds, which are the ones on the side. And then for the flowers, so maples sorry, sugar maples are monoecious, so they have both male and female flowers on the same individual. And so on the bottom left-hand photo, those are typically what the male flowers look like. And then the photo in the bottom middle, those are what the female flowers look like. And you can see those kind of little wispy bits at the end are what will eventually turn into the fruit, which is the bottom left-hand photo. Though the fruiting body of sugar maple are called samaras, and other maples, they're also called samaras as well. And so the design of these is because the seeds are wind dispersed. So I'm sure a lot of us have seen the samaras, or I used to call them helicopters when I was little. As they're falling off the tree, they'll, catch a breeze, or they'll catch the air a little bit, and they'll, be spinning around in a circle until they land somewhere else. And so this is typically the kind of form of the aƞhasa fruiting bodies. So called a double wing samara, and they're pointing down pretty drastically, whereas some other species of maple, sometimes the wings will be directly out from each other, or slightly pointed down, things like that. That's the best way I can describe it. I should put in some more visuals. But I also wanted to show y'all the different colors that the aƞhasa leaves can turn in the fall. Typically, you'll see them as these like bright yellow to orange to red tones, but then they can get, depending on when it falls off the tree, can stay a little bit green, and it can turn into these really, really deep reds as well. And so I just wanted to include that photo on the right-hand side, just to show the variation of, colors that can come from the leaves. And I also wanted to show you all this medallion that I have. So this was made by Amber Wabus, who is a Ojibwa quill work artist. She quills a lot on birch bark. And so this is a sugar maple leaf that she put and made into a medallion. And so you can kind of see the colors. She included all the different colors that aƞhasa can turn in the fall as well. So I just wanted to share that with y'all because that's one of my fancy things that I put on for fancy pants occasions. And yeah, it's just really, really pretty. I wanted to share that. And then for the sap for aƞhasa, so if you wanted another way to identify this, being able to drill into the bark and you'll be able to see sap come out of it pretty easily in the late winter and early spring. And so that sap is generally pretty clear to kind of a yellow tinge to it. And you can kind of see that. I want just to include a photo of what that sap looks like fresh out of the tree. And just to share super quick, I for one season I got to do sugar bush with my uncle, who had set up sugar bush at in my aunt's backyard actually. And so I took out my son at the time, who was like maybe 3 years old. Actually, he might have been 2 at the time. And took him out, and we were doing sugar bush out there, helping collect sap, drill trees, watching them cook and everything, and just hanging out, being with family. And one of my favorite memories from that spring and winter is when my uncle was teaching us how to drill into the tree and then put your little spigot in. He actually let my son drink right out of the tree, and it was so cute because he looked like a little hamster there drinking out of the tree, and he still talks about it to this day. Just really sweet memories. And my uncle was pretty stingy with the things that he was making, but he let my son drink as much of the sugar water as he wanted, whereas I asked for a small little taste, and he was like, "No, you can't have any." So just wanted to share that memory as well. If we want to go to the next slide. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the kinship roles that aƞhasa has with different wildlife. Um, so of course, aƞhasa is very, very important food source for a lot of different animals, but people as well. So the foliage and the twigs are browsed on by deer, especially. The deer really love the young seedlings as they're coming up. But then the samaras or the fruits and then the buds and flowers and the inner bark are eaten by a number of different small mammals, birds, and insects as well. And then the sap, of course, is eaten by a number of different birds. You can see in that upper left-hand photo, the squirrel is trying to get some sap out of the tree. You can typically see them doing this in February. That's about the time where their reserves are kind of dwindling, and so they have to rely on the sugar maple and trying to get as much sap as they can so they don't starve before spring comes. But then aƞhasa has also really great cover and nesting for a number of different wildlife. The cavities that can sometimes form, and especially the older maples are really great for birds and small mammals. If you get a big enough maple, sometimes you'll even see bears denning in them as well. And then the maples are also really great for insect burrows as well. And so, yeah, the animals that rely on them the most. Oh, I do want to mention that bears occasionally in the spring will rip off the bark of sugar maples to get at some of that sap as well. I thought that was a pretty cool fact I wanted to share. But we have in the middle left hand a pileated woodpecker, so they like to feed on a lot of the different insects that will burrow in the sugar maple. And then right across from that is the yellow-bellied sapsucker, which will poke holes into the sugar maple to drink the sap, but then will also come back and feed on some of the insects that come and feed on those sap holes as well. And then sugar maple also is a host for the rosy maple moth, which is that bottom left-hand photo. We do have some populations here in Minnesota, but I think they're found more commonly out east. And then that bottom right-hand photo is a picture of a deer that's actually licking some sap from the tree. And I know y'all probably can't see it, but in the upper right-hand photo, it's a picture of a green striped maple worm, which eventually turns into a type of moss. Okay, I know we're running low on time. Let's go to the next slide. So the ecological kinship roles that aƞhasa has with the broader environments that it grows in. So it likes to grow with a number of different plants. Other trees you'll commonly find it with, especially in the more northern portions of Minnesota and Wisconsin, are beech trees, yellow birch, basswood, and this is more in Wisconsin, but hemlock as well. And then growing underneath aƞhasa, you'll often find Pennsylvania sedge, Virginia waterleaf, wild sarsaparilla, large leaf asters, blue-bead lilies, bunchberries, Canada mayflowers, beaked hazel, amongst a number of different things. Because sugar maples support an insane amount of biodiversity as well. They're also really important for nutrient cycling in the soil as well. Really kind of a key point to that is that they can be really important for getting nitrogen back into the soil. So there's bacteria that lives in the soil of the decomposed leaves that fall off of the sugar maples each year. And from those leaves come a pretty high content of nitrogen that then gets decomposed back into the soil, which plants underneath it can utilize as well. And then there's, I think I mentioned in the beginning when I was talking about the leaves during the identification part, all the different nutrients that are found in the leaves. Once those are decomposed and added into the soil, those other nutrients are also released to different plants. And then aƞhasa is really important for cooling during the hot summers because they like to grow in these very dense stands. So it's a lot of nice shade. But then in the winter as well, because of those dense canopies, they're really important for thermal cover as well. So providing areas of slightly warmer environment for different wildlife. And then lastly, one of the ecological kinship roles that it has is once they're able to get to a large old size, they're really, really important carbon sinks as well. And sugar maples can actually get to be up to 4 feet across if you let them grow in just the right conditions as well. All right, next photo. Oh, slide on it, yeah. So I wanted to show this photo of kind of what a typical canopy could look like in a sugar maple stand, and you'll see it's also growing with some other trees as well in the canopy. But really, I wanted to point out how kind of skinny these trees can look too. I remember when I was, younger, walking in sugar maple stands, I would think, oh, these are all a bunch of, little baby and teenager trees because they're so tiny. But, because the sugar maple is a very shade tolerant tree, it can go for decades in very low light conditions, staying pretty small. I've seen sugar maples that are, less than a foot across to up to a foot across that can be around 50 to 70 years old. And essentially, this shade tolerance is a mechanism where it's growing slowly and waiting and waiting and waiting for one of the older canopy trees to fall over and create a gap in the canopy, which at that point, all the smaller sugar maples underneath it are then trying to sprout and do a race to the canopy to see who can fill in that gap. So I just wanted to point that out as well. Next slide. So some of the threats to sugar maple, climate change, of course, especially with these warmer and shorter winters, it's especially very difficult on the sap flowage as well. But sugar maples also do prefer slightly cooler climates as well. And then also the more frequent droughts, at least here in Minnesota, that are expected to be exacerbated into the future with climate change, just because sugar maple does need semi-moist soil conditions as well. Deer browse is also a really big issue. Deer love to browse on the young sugar maple seedlings. And with the warmer winters, the deer populations are growing a lot. So there's more deer browse, which can affect the regeneration of sugar maple as well, making it really hard for new trees to replace the old ones that eventually get lost in the canopy. Salt and air pollution are also a big issue in urban settings, especially. Aṟhasań is not tolerant at all to salt. It's very sensitive to salt. And air pollution can cause things like acid rain and make the surrounding habitat very acidic, which is also not a great condition for this tree. And then diseases is a really big issue as well, because things like climate change really stress out these trees and make them more susceptible to diseases and things like invasive species as well. So a common disease that you'll see is verticillium wilt, which is a fungus disease. It's very common in the soil and really shows up in those stressed maples as well. That's that really small top photo as well. And you'll usually see dieback starting from the bottom and moving up the tree, but it's really, the leaves get wilty and start dying off, and then whole branches start dying off, and it could eventually spread to the rest of the canopy in the tree. Anthracnose is another fungal disease that's common in maples, and then tar spot as well, which is this bottom left-hand photo. The anthracnose and tar spot generally aren't too big of issues, and the tree can usually survive just fine. But like I said, under climate change conditions where trees are stressed, or urban conditions where trees are stressed, these diseases can be exacerbated and can kill a tree. One of the last ones is, our invasive species that are here in Minnesota. Earthworms especially are a major threat to sugar maples. You can see in this one of these photos up here. It's a side-by-side of the bottom of a sugar maple before an earthworm invasion and then after an earthworm invasion. So really the biggest issue with earthworms is that they consume the leaf litter way too quickly. Sugar maples really need a pretty thick organic soil layer in the environments that they grow in. And those earthworms eat up that organic layer, that duff layer, way too quickly. So this disrupts seedling growth. There's nowhere for the sugar maples to grow because it exposes mineral soil, which is not ideal conditions for seedling growth. And it disturbs the soil structures and exposes roots and can lead to pretty bad erosion and site conditions as well. And then the last one is some invasive species like the Asian longhorn beetle, which can defoliate sugar maples pretty easily, and buckthorn, which competes in the understory as well. All right, I think that's it.
Thank you, Gabby. I've been calling her like an environmental scientist wizard because she's amazing and knows so much stuff. We wanted to shout out some native-owned businesses that have sugar maple products. Here's a few of them that we found. And I want to get to questions because we have some questions and some comments from Facebook and from Zoom. Would you be able to turn my camera on? So just some comments from Facebook. For Nicki, there's some people, someone shared or people shared how they are also tree huggers and were taught that trees take care of your spirit, like they take care of the air. They agreed that maple sugar is medicine and enjoy eating young leaves and flower clusters and make tea with dried maple flowers. And they like that Gabby's son was your memory of your son drinking the sap from the tree. I think this is maybe directed for everyone. Do you have a favorite recipe that you make with syrup? So I guess we haven't seen Beckie in a little bit, so maybe if Beckie has a favorite recipe that she likes to make with the syrup, the maple syrup.
Actually, if I get enough maple syrup, I try to at least incorporate it into one recipe per week. And you just substitute it for the dry or the white sugar, and it's just the same 1-to-1. So if you buy maple sugar in the store, it is very expensive. So like I said, my family's been very fortunate to be able to do this and be able to have that substitute. So anything you want to use. But I think the most favorite thing that I like to make is when I make my wasna. I will use my sugar, my maple sugar in my wasna, the dried meat. But if otherwise, sometimes like now, sorry, there was a comment I saw or a question that I wanted to answer and address, and it was I think it was from Maddie. In the question, she asked how we are adapting to climate change. And so this kind of goes hand in hand. We're doing earlier preparations where instead of I would prep in February, I'm prepping in January now, ensuring that I have wood, ensuring that I have enough supplies, filters, taps, making sure, checking all my stuff, sterilizing all of my stuff, just in my downtime, and making sure that access to the trees and picking the trees that we're going to use. Earlier tapping, we're going out a lot earlier and tapping and pulling our taps. That's the other thing is I only collect what I can use. I don't like to waste a lot of stuff. So another aspect of climate change now from the droughts is it's dry outside. There was just a fire in my community and windy, and other than having my garden hose out and ready if something should happen, I can't boil. So I have 20 gallons still sitting outside that I need to process, but I can't burn outside. So we are actually looking at getting an enclosed stove for next year so that we can reduce our fire hazard. So what I'm going to do with that sap is I'm going to store it, or I'm going to just drink it, like filter it, because you can just drink it straight from the tree, like she said, like her little boy did. Yeah, my little girl, she does that too. And and it is much better if you ever need like a sweet treat. Like me, I like to have something sweet at the end of the night. The way that maple sugar processes in your body, instead of like white sugar, you have a spike in your blood sugar, and then you have like a drop. And when you have maple sugar, it gradually goes up and it gradually comes down, so you don't have those hypoglycemic events where your blood sugar drops and stuff. And it's easier on your body to metabolize. So when it's going through your body in the middle of the night, when I need something sweet before I go to bed, if I just drink some of that water beforehand, I'm not wasting, I'm using what I have. And it's one of the factors of climate change now, because I can't burn right now. So I think that was all I wanted to share about that. Oh, and one of the other uses that we don't just use the maple uh, for harvesting for the sugar, we also utilize it in the construction of our ceremonial lodges. So we will use them in a number of our different ceremonial structures and our wigwams and lodges that we construct. So that's another use that we have, that culturally that we use it for. That's all.
Thank you.
Yep.
Nicki, a question for you. You mentioned how it's your role to create welcoming spaces. Are there opportunities for non-Indigenous folks to learn more and engage in harvesting and processing of the maple sap?
So what we've been doing, I like to take things on a smaller scale. So high school is almost like a little mini metropolis itself, right? So what we've been doing with these things, because what was taught to me by Uncle Art is like, we take care of all of our relatives, to be Dakota. And as Beckie has demonstrated it very well for the last 35 years, in which I didn't realize it was 35 years we've been paired up. It seems much longer than that, but not everybody, not there's a fine line between appropriation, right? Not all of our relatives are there because they're protecting something, right? Because we're not there yet with our non-Indigenous relatives. So what we've done for creating opportunities is, because I've worked in the government side of Prairie Island for so long, I do understand where the disconnect between both worlds are. Sometimes with appropriation, non-Indigenous people, they get to experience the really wonderful and beautiful things about our culture, but they don't understand the current and active genocide that is against our people at this moment. And so being able to creating opportunities. So what we did at the high school is we have that NASA. So that's the Native American Student Association, and you do not have to be Native American to join that. And so that's one door that they can come in and be able to participate on these things. So not all Native students were there that day. There was a few non-Native students that were a part of that day too. And that way we have an ability to control that just a little bit better. So that way that the teachings can be administered in a way that these things are new for us, right? We're gonna mess up, but we want to make sure that the impact is minimal, because at the end of the day, we all have a job to do. And that's that medicine wheel. Earth is going to get sick one day. All walks of life are going to come together with the great powers of man. And we have a responsibility to put all of our powers together and save our earth. So that way that I always like to see the sunny side of things. Even though I know what the effects could be, I'd rather see a happy ending saying that we all came together, we saved our planet, and we didn't have to worry about these climate change effects anymore because we did our job. We changed the path for the next 7 generations to go to a different direction. So my suggestion is learning about Indigenous people and the current events that we are going through now. And that will be a huge insight and a connection to the past of what has happened. We don't want to here's another thing. Sometimes it's called Lifeways for more than one reason. Lifeways is these ways teach you how to be a human being, right? And so sometimes those relationships need to slow down and be done in a right way. So another thing where for the different change of the seasons. So now what was taught to me is we heard thunder, we're done here. So we move on to the next. We wait for the next relative to present itself. And we go from there. Everybody's got their gift. Everybody's got their moment to shine. So I hope I answered that question in a good way.
Thank you. So we are a little bit over time. I want to thank everyone for coming. We will send links from the presentation in a follow-up email. Thank you to our staff that are on. Thank you again to Nicki, Beckie, and Gabby. A survey link will pop up when the webinar ends on Zoom, and for Facebook, the survey should already be in the comments, the feedback survey. We would really appreciate your feedback. And a follow-up email for those who registered will be sent out with the survey. Pidamaya to everyone for taking your time to be here today. Wopida Tanka. Doksha Ake. We'll talk to you later.